Thanks to Pubmatic, and welcome to our session on connected TV. I'm Will Richmond, editor and publisher of VideoNuze, and I'm delighted to be here. And I'd like to first ask our fantastic panelists to introduce themselves, say a little bit about what they do, what their company does, and then we're going to dive right into discussion. So Ashley, we'll start alphabetically with you.
Thanks. Great to be here, Will. Thank you. My name is Ashley Swartz. I'm CEO of Furious Corp. We are a yield optimization platform for sellers of linear television and digital video. We specifically provide automated pricing and inventory allocation and management decisioning.
Thanks. Ashwin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashwin Navin, co-founder, CEO of Samba TV. We're a TV data company operating at global scale. We power innovations of various types, including creating a more scientific approach to advertising using smart TV data.
Beth-ann.
Hi, thank you so much, Will. I'm Beth-ann Eason, Managing Director at Accenture Interactive. Accenture Interactive is the world's largest digital agency.
And Tim.
Thanks, Will. I'm Tim Ware. I'm the Executive Director of Programmatic Demand at Crackle Plus, a portfolio of streaming ad-supported video-on-demand services. Crackle, being the flagship service, was one of the original gangsters in OTT, and I can embellish on that at another time, but thanks for having me.
Tim, if you're going to start dropping contemporary language like the OG, I'm going to get left in the dust here pretty quickly. So
we'll get jiggy with it. Well, all right.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. So obviously, I think we can probably all agree that connected TV is, if not the hottest area, one of the hottest areas of the entire advertising landscape right now. And I thought it would be good just to set the stage a little bit and start at the 30,000 foot level, talking about why is CTV having its moment. And just to put a little context around it, eMarketer's latest forecast for connected TV ad spending in the US alone is $27.5 billion by 2025. That's about double what it's going to be in 2021. Dan Salmon at BMO actually just came out with a forecast of over $58 billion in US CTV ad spending by 2025. So the numbers seem to be getting bigger and bigger for everybody in the industry, which in turn is causing even more excitement. So let's start again at 30,000 feet. Beth-ann, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. If you could just give us a little bit of a sense from your perspective about what is driving CTV and what are you seeing from the marketer side?
So from the marketer side, they're first and foremost focused on what the customers are doing and how that behavior is changing. And there's a lot of change that happened all at once. First and foremost, consumers want a different experience than ever before, and they want that experience to be as good as the next guy. So when Amazon has 2-day shipping, they want everybody to have 2-day shipping. When Best Buy has curbside pickup in 48 hours, you better believe everybody else better be there. So marketers are facing this surge of consumers wanting a better experience. Second, now they're looking at digital as their primary purchasing path. And we saw that during COVID. We talk about it accelerating 10 years, but sure enough, it accelerated. And to be able to provide new experiences in digital is the second major trend that marketers are trying to address on behalf of consumers. And the third is purpose. They want to make sure that whatever brand they're engaging with has a purpose that resonates with them. So you take all of that, and for a marketer to be relevant to that consumer is the only way that they're going to grow. So they look at the universe of where they can be connecting with that consumer. And there are a couple major trends going on. One, they're looking to create more value for that consumer so they can earn a one-to-one relationship. The second is that the more they understand about where that customer is on their journey, the better able they are to message to them differently. And the third is that the interactivity that's possible in digital is now possible in television, courtesy of connected TV. So you have the consumption patterns of consumers that are following all three of those trends. And now you have the opportunity for marketers to think about TV as the ultimate engagement platform and to be able to connect all of those pieces. So when you say, why is connected TV having its day, that's absolutely why in my book.
Okay, great. And so just to keep things interesting, why don't we stay with this question, but flip back and forth between the buy side and the sell side. So let's get the sell side perspective first. Let's start with you, Tim, from the Crackle perspective, again, the sell side perspective. Why is CTV having its moment right now?
Yeah, well, as I was kind of joking in my intro, you know, Crackle launched 10 years ago, and I personally had connected TV on my calling card for about that long as well. I haven't been here, I've been at an SSP, but you know, obviously the acceleration, you know, the pandemic, in spite of the, you know, the tragedy around it, you know, if it wasn't already adopted by the mainstream, it is now. And I think about where it used to be, you know, Gen X and early adopters. Now it's become mainstream, and really it's a byproduct of all the great programming, obviously the organic growth, the new distribution endpoints, which we can get into, and really a lot of the innovation that, you know, everybody on this panel, I kind of went back and checked LinkedIn, and we're all connected, and I have kind of specific memories. And, you know, we spent the better part of the last 5 to 7 years developing a lot of these capabilities, which once upon a time were like science fiction, but now they're actually science, dare I say, almost. And it's really, it's just really, it's time now. And obviously there's lower supply with some of the legacy linear media companies who are writing very nice numbers in streaming. And as an independent streamer and working for a brand that was maybe 8 years too early, if you're not early, you're late, but you know, it's really gratifying to see the acknowledgement of brand marketers, as Beth-ann suggested, and we're kind of seizing this moment. So excited to talk about how that's being implemented. But
Tim, you keep dating us in all your comments, so I'm hoping that we're going to break you out of that. We're not.
It's taken longer than we all thought for this kind of.
Right, it's so true that what they say is that it happens slowly and then all at once. And Tim's point, I think it's a very valid one. There's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone on for the last decade in order to make this moment possible.
Okay, so let's let everybody weigh in on sort of why this moment is happening. So let's again flip back to the buy side. Ashwin, your perspective on why CTV is having its moment.
Well, it's where we're spending our time, and you know, marketers need to deploy their messaging where consumer attention lies. And you know, one thing we have in terms of a proprietary insight is just how much change has happened in the living room in recent years. We've seen steady decline in linear consumption, a steady increase in streaming catalog usage. But what happened in 2020 was, you know, like that acceleration that I think many of us, we're connected TV native. We've been doing this for 12 years. We've built our company at CES, going booth to booth and talking to every consumer electronics company making connected TVs 12 years ago. And the moment has finally arrived. And the reason is that, and why we've seen an acceleration, is that linear went dark in Q2 of last year. Sports went off the air. The number of new shows getting produced in prime time on linear stopped. And the only thing that was really holding linear up was a very difficult year from a news perspective, and live news, you know, carried the day. But what people were doing when they weren't fixated by headlines is turning to their streaming catalogs, and that's an irreversible trend line, and it's accelerating now going into 2021 because these habits have been formed. The attention is on the streaming catalog. And now I think Will, your forecast that you shared earlier from eMarketer might prove to be conservative, is that most of these models are built on linear disruption, but there's some other disruption happening around the edges of our universe in connected TV, which is that you've got mobile ID deprecation, you've got potential desktop disruption, and you've got linear disruption. So not only is the linear movement happening in favor of connected TV, but you've got these other two pillars that are falling in favor of connected TV as well, which is proving to be not only the most immersive and great experience for consumers, but it's also could be the most addressable and measurable of all of them when all's said and done.
So Ashwin, I'm going to ask you to just hold that point for a second, because we want to get into all of that as we drill down further. But I do just want to ask Ashley to jump in and round us out here in terms of the 30,000 foot view, what's driving CTV, and then we're going to drill into some of the details.
I spend my days, you know, sort of serving sellers of linear television. I mean, they have obviously digital video portfolios as well, but we primarily focus on maximizing the value of their linear assets. And I have this joke that, there's dog years, it's 7-1, right? So I think it's the inverse for television. It's like 5 human years is 1 TV year. So I think Beth-ann's point is right. It's like, hurry up and wait, because I remember the first time I met Ashwin was probably 10 years ago in SF when you first founded the company. And we were talking about creating an ACR triggered ad server, for connected televisions, for smart TVs, right? So it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day. And I would love to espouse something, sort of like elegant and strategic about what's happening. But I have to kind of agree with Ashwin and say it a little bit more radically candid, is that it's just reactive. I think the hurry up and the acceleration was 100% a reallocation of sort of its technology investment dollars to deploy over the top or CTV platforms as quickly as possible. Because prior to COVID, everybody had settled for what was a really crappy CTV experience. We talk about ad loads, frequency caps, all of those things, right? Especially from the national broadcasters. So I think that, this was just forcing the hand. And so I believe that, fear, uncertainty, and doubt causes people to take action. And I think that's a lot of, honestly, what happened on the sell side.
No, that's an excellent point. I think the thing when I start getting kind of nostalgic here, it's, it's not like, and you're living proof, right? I don't have to tell you, it's we wake up, we've been all like, now it's just really neat that everybody's ready to do it. But I think the other thing Ashwin and Ashley touched upon is like, there's such undeniable evidence now of the migration. And I remember John Musinski giving a thing at one of these TV conferences a couple of years ago. He's like, where's your upfront budgets? Where's your audiences? And, having lived through the internet emergence and the years of mobile, which was probably about 10 years ago for about 3 years, it's not until you see this undeniable evidence and loss of like an audience that it's like, oh, wait, we got to go kind of change our KPIs. And I think that's, again, real, the excitement, which is why it's upon us now. It's probably been here for a few years running, but now, nobody's got any choices. And if you want to survive.
I'm going to start getting all teary-eyed if you guys keep with this nostalgic, wistful tones. Can we please bring it up to the current day?
I have a ukulele somewhere in this room, I'm sure. I live at the beach. So.
There's going to be some soft piano music on an overtone here in a moment if we're not careful. Let's jump in here. And Ashwin, I'd like to bring it back to you because you raised, I thought, a couple of very important points about potential additional fuel, if that's even something that we want to think about beyond these big forecasts we're seeing. But what I'd like to ask you more specifically about is, from your vantage point, as you think about, obviously, CTV taking on a primary role in the overall advertising ecosystem, how are you thinking about its role relative to omni-channel for marketers? So again, mobile, desktop, social, other forms, other channels. How are you guys thinking about omni-channel?
Well, there was a point in time when you could say 90% of the population gathered around one screen in the home at prime time every night. And we know that those days are long gone. And that the new prime time is every screen all the time. We're staring at some surface that's rendering video or other information that we care about throughout the day. And so from a consumer standpoint, that's in a way kind of exciting. Like, there's a lot to be interested in and focused on and attentive to from a brand marketer's perspective. That's very disruptive, because all the rules, the playbook associated with brand building from the 20th century is useless today. You can't predict the consumer's behavior. And so the only way that you can reconstruct a brand strategy is with data that addresses an audience and a household and an individual on a one-to-one basis. Without the data that gives you understanding of your customers on a one-to-one basis, there's no way that you can build a brand today against that backdrop. But when you construct a data spine, a backbone of data that basically lets you understand your customer, you can start to present your brand in entirely new and fascinating ways. And I think some people call this omni-channel. We call it an omni-screen canvas, because to paint a picture for the consumer, to tell them your story across all these devices, is a profound new capability in the marketer's playbook. Connected TV just happens to have solved a very big hole, which is that while we were, building everything off of the back of linear television, now we have a truly addressable solution in the middle of that brand experience that's just as measurable as any other display, any other media format that has been, that's come into existence over the last couple of decades in digital. We now have that same power, that same capability across every surface.
So undeniable, Ashwin, that data is playing a central role in all of this, but maybe this is a way to bring Beth-ann, you back into the conversation. From your perspective, I hear a lot of consternation out there about walled gardens, about proprietary first-party data, about frequency, deduplication, et cetera. How are marketers to deal when they know they want to be omni-channel or have the omni-channel canvas, as Ashwin well said? How are they dealing with these silos and walled gardens that, of course, are becoming more and more common?
But the number one thing marketers are doing is thinking about how they can create value specifically for the customer to earn the right to have a first party connection with them. And that's going beyond having a 20% off or an email, which is kind of standard fare. It's really thinking about wherever you might be. Is it the Disney band when you're actually in the park to be able to get on rides faster? What does that experience look like? What are they willing to give up for that exchange, and how do we keep serving the customer? So I do believe that in this whole process, it really will be the consumer that will win. So marketers are arming themselves with earning that right and getting as much first party data and learning as much as they can about those audiences, because they will have to, where they don't have first party data, they're going to have to learn and understand as much as they can about the audiences that they have so that they can replicate them. There is no doubt that we all want a vibrant ecosystem, and marketers want multiple choices, not just a couple walled gardens that are going to be able to call the shots about what can happen within their own universes. So therefore, they are investing the time and effort to understand a variety of different content providers and what they're doing to be able to bring that unique customer to the table and how you can engage them within that platform. Because someone who loves a specific brand is committed to it across whatever channel they might be able to consume that content.
Okay, so let's flip that over then to the sell side. Ashley and Tim, bring you back into the conversation. Beth-ann says all of the buy side, the marketers, are developing their own first party data. Curious to get your guys' opinion on all the sell-siders that are developing their own proprietary first-party data and how all this is going to sort itself out when everybody's kind of running around with their own first-party data saying we can do the best job of targeting your audience. Where's all this going to go?
From my immediate post right now, we have light registration, so first-party data really isn't as material right now in terms of how we. It's not like we have subscribers like the MVPDs. We do have a light subscriber, but I will say that our data enablement has grown immeasurably. And again, as I suggested at the outset here, is concepts that we were kind of dreaming up and trying to enable through SSPs when I was at Talaria, working with companies like SpotX and the innovation that's happening. We can push segments. We've had campaigns where we're generating, mid six figures, which is, a nice nut and just targeted media spend. And it's using third-party segments. It's using blended segments with first and third-party segments where we can have an automotive push segments through LiveRamp and ingest it. Or, there's obviously more DMPs, TransUnion, et cetera, they bought True Optics. So it's just becoming so fluid right now, at the risk of overusing that and dropping that for the first time. We'll say it again. But it's just really neat that I actually have like scale, whereas I think a few years ago we're like, oh, really? We only got, you're talking about several thousand, but now we're well into the millions for 30-day campaign for targeted data enabled segments. And that's awesome. And it's great that I can enable it now and layer in data on my side. Whereas a couple of years ago, I'd have to rely on a DSP like the Trade Desk who has great targeting capabilities, but it's nice to have those options, from a transaction vantage point. And it increases the value of programmatic, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about.
Definitely want to get back to programmatic, Tim, and for sure. So Ashley, just bringing you into the conversation again, thinking about data, and I know that you're interested in addressing the distinction between measurement and currency, and of course all that is wrapped up in data. So what's your take on all this?
Well, sort of before I address that second subject, I just want to say I'm going to take a myopic lens because I think it's a point of differentiation with my colleagues that I'm going to myopically focus on traditional linear, so local, cable, etc. And I would suggest to say that it's a fair statement without judgment that there is not a lot of muscle memory in the traditional ad sales organizations to use data to make advertising decisions, right? The systems are old, they're clunky, and honestly, most of the players that provide their transactional systems don't really like to share and play nice with one another, so getting data out of them is really hard. That's why, smart gentlemen like Dave Morgan have made a business on knowing more about the audiences from these traditional linear TV sellers than they do themselves. And if you talk about cable specifically, their subscriber data is their gold. They're not going to use that for their advertising business because their advertising business is such a small portion of it, right? So I think you have this sort of natural agita with this construct of, really using anything with which to target or accumulating first party data. There's a little bit of an identity crisis there because it goes against the DNA of their core businesses. So, and I don't think they're going to, readily embrace it as quick just because they're moving on to digital platforms. I think it's going to take something like full migration to pure IP-based delivery, both, traditional linear trafficking and in a terrestrial feed as well as on digital in order for that to happen. So that lends itself very organically to the currency versus measurement question, which I think it's important to distinguish, right? Measurement is about, to me, from a marketer's perspective of, am I getting the value for what I've paid? And I've determined, what value I want, what's my KPIs, right? But currency is a different thing. Currency is about packaging and productizing video inventory. Right. So the challenge is, which is one of the reasons that the use of data is difficult, is because in order to be able to do that, you have to have enabled within your ad sales enterprise complete fluidity to be able to sell on a performance basis, to be able to sell on, a cost per complete, which is why Jerry Wang, was gangbusters when she was running ABC. She innovated and took a risk, or sell on a CPM or a spot or a cost per point, because you're going to have from the demand side and the buy side, you're going to continue to have different agencies, different teams that are either working in silos or ambitiously, looking at omni-channel, and they're all going to want the 31 flavors. So, there's a lot of catch up to do. And I think that the construct of a walled garden is utopic. And I think that ultimately what will happen is the pendulum will swing back and people will just go down. Traditional linear sellers will go back to protecting their core business, which is their cash cow, and folding in this new emerging CTV business into it so that it amplifies the value of their tentpole.
I think arguably we're already saying that, right, Ashley?
I don't know, because I feel like when we talk, whether it's you talk about currencies and bringing in sort of, startups with different measurement currencies, or you talk about CTV, I still feel sometimes like it's shiny objects, right? And so, that if you look at how the walled gardens are presenting identity graphs and the different things they're calling them, household graphs, et cetera, I still think we're in that world. And I don't know that we've evolved past that to sort of talk about running a ubiquitous video business. So that's the conversation I'm really excited to have.
We don't have a ton of time left here, but I would like to get all of you back into the conversation to just talk a little bit about, kind of picking up on Ashley's points. Obviously, the forecasts for CTV are extremely bullish, but I'd like to get all of your perspectives as we kind of forge forward here a little bit. What are the key challenges? Ashley has already outlined a few of them. What are the key challenges? And Tim, I know you want to talk specifically, if you may, about programmatic and how that may address some of the challenges. So let's just kind of take it around the horn again. Maybe Beth-ann, from your perspective, key challenges for CTV and, in a few words, how that's going to be resolved.
I think the number one challenge is that brand marketers understand $1 put into linear TV will create X in terms of sales, and they don't yet have that equivalent in CTV at scale. And how it will be solved is by continuing to bring stronger measurement tools to the table and really focus on delivering business outcomes and understanding exactly what that means for each brand marketer.
Ashwin?
There's a lot of things that we've talked about that I think are worth discussing, but maybe a few things that popped out. One, part of why we're feeling like there's a shiny object syndrome going on is we've had one currency to rule television for decades, and that's no longer tenable. You can't possibly measure the things that matter to marketers with one yardstick. For a pharma brand or a CPG brand or an auto brand or a DTC brand, very different things that they care about and that they're trying to drive and will want to measure. And to the extent that they can bring what they are measuring into the conversation of how they pay is what converts a measurement tool or a solution into currency. When they can pay for what matters to them, it becomes currency. And I think that we're going to see a lot of things happen in the connected TV space, a lot of innovative forms of measurement that defeat the one currency that rules them all in favor of multiple currencies that marketers can bring if they demand it of their suppliers. If the marketer asks a supplier for a specific type of tool or technology to measure the performance of media and is insistent and demands it, the marketer will get it. It is a buyer's market right now. And we believe that a neutral data provider, like us, a neutral inventory supplier like Pubmatic, married together gives marketers a very profound new view of television that allows you to measure profoundly anything, top of funnel, mid funnel, lower funnel, from a very large and scaled solution in the marketplace. So this is really there for the marketers to do things with television that they've never been able to do in the past. And with all of the stability and privacy compliance of a walled garden, with the scalability of a neutral ecosystem that ad tech provides us.
Ashwin, when you talk about multiple currencies, who's grading all this homework? How are marketers going to know that what they're getting is actually real?
First party. They have their own CRM files. They know how effectively they're adding customers to their business or how well they convert, from top of the funnel down. The marketer has that technology. It's now time for them to demand that of their suppliers so they can see exactly how well each of their tactics perform.
So self-policing, in a sense, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
There's nothing more truthful than someone who came to my website, added something to a shopping cart and bought it. Like, that's truthful. And if you can tag that to, a set of exposures up the funnel, that's holy grail, and it's possible today.
Fair enough. Over to you, Tim. Challenges, and tell us more, if you would, about where programmatic fits into all this.
Well, I'm first going to say, Ashwin was talking about currency. He didn't even mention the elephant in the room. I'll say it. So with Nielsen DAR kind of serving as the guardrail for streaming video, I did have I've had a couple of clients, brands in the last couple of months who set down that path and course corrected. And it was like kind of your dream, like, hey, this wasn't working. We actually, to Ashwin's point, we actually have, data on our customers in the field. And if it's not working, you're missing out on unique reach. And the challenge with unique reach, and I'm sure Samba measures unique reach, there's services like iSpot TV, which really are fueling the migration of budgets here. But, touching upon, the challenges, and this lends itself to programmatic, it's really the infrastructure. So at the risk of sounding like President Biden, dare I say, right? Every media company from Crackle and independent, we're furiously rebuilding, no pun intended, Ashley, but our infrastructure to support these capabilities. And it's not easy, to say the least. And, I can only imagine, my old places I worked, whether it's like, ABC and Disney. There's a lot of infrastructure undertakings going on to support what will be kind of that next wave of currency. And I think we all agree it's not just one yardstick, as Ashwin suggested. I'll pause there with programmatic. And having lived, and Will, I'm sorry, I'm getting so darn nostalgic here, but, having lived through, the cable television, outset, and you remember when cable viewership surpassed the HUT levels of network, and I was like, it can't happen. And then, 15 years later, or 20 maybe between 15 and 20, here we are, and connected TV consumption is surpassing viewership. And how do you manage it? And I think programmatic's really the only answer, because it helps you streamline, it helps you target, it helps you measure, it helps you pre-bid, filter, fraud. And from a sell side, again, I can remember being at ESPN and having billing discrepancies hold up payment for 6 months, which costs you, getting money in 60 or 90 days and knowing I'm going to get it. And there's going to be some defaults here and there, but I mean, and again, SSP providers, I want my fees to go down, Pubmatic, et cetera. But, the fees that SSPs like charge a publisher, I would say are worth it after you measure a lot of the friction and combined with the targeting and the enhanced capabilities that are really they're becoming required, particularly if you want to take more ad spend off the table, which is migrating. They become necessary. So that's my rant.
All right, fair enough. I'm committed to trying to keep us as close to on time as possible. So I want to ask all of you just one final question, and I'll ask you to just keep your answer super tight, maybe 30 seconds or less if you can. There's obviously a ton going on in CTV right now, a lot of optimism, really cool to see. Without adding to Tim's nostalgic tone, it's a long time in the making, but it's for all of us great to see it actually happening. What is one thing, as you guys look forward, that is not yet being discussed, something that is not yet really in the conversation as relates to CTV that we're going to be hearing more about? Let's do it reverse alphabetically this time. So Tim, you first.
Well, are you talking like a year, or are you talking like 2 or 3?
Any timeline you want. Let's just say in the next year.
There's a few I could pick. I'm going to go with content metadata, and I'm going to speak from a native streaming video CTV publisher. There's got to be transparency, and it's there, right? To me, and having worked at both big and independent publishers, it's a question of where you can prioritize and how you can service it. But look, there's a lot of complexities that come with it. But again, whether you call it AI or kind of early onset of AI, I can tell you, you're running in a horror movie. Are you selling more, Hershey's chocolate bars and horror, and Twizzlers in comedies? I like to think people like Twizzlers with comedies. I don't know, but we're going to start to get to that point where I would think some of these, in a Mobi, a Verizon, a Trade Desk, are going to start to be able to. Again, you can do it manually now in a limited basis, but the whole notion of passing genre, contextual targeting. There's Iris TV out there, which is a hot new company as well. So it's really signaling off the increased utilization of data, and then really getting scale. So I'm going to say content metadata, Will, for my.
All right, content metadata for 500.
Yeah.
Beth-ann, on to you.
Creative. Video is the #1 storytelling medium, and we are just beginning to scratch the surface and what's possible in creative, and really thinking about how we can pull apart different video assets and think about render them differently based on what we know about a customer, and thinking about what products are actually available based on the supply chain. So going back to experience, you don't want to be promoting a product that's not available because it's stuck in the Suez Canal, right? So that whole process is going to be completely disrupted, and the opportunity to aggregate creative and customize video based on what you know about a customer is in its infancy, and I think it's game changing.
All right, I have one word for you: plastics. I mean creative. Sorry. Okay, fair enough. Ashwin, you're up next.
Well played.
I'm going to use the word first touch. And I think we're going to hear more about it in various ways. If you think about 70% of where the digital media budget goes, it's attributed to last touch pricing models, cost per click, for example. And Facebook, Google have taken this to the bank, for the last 20 years. But when you think about the scale, where the value is for marketers in, portfolios like Disney and portfolios like NBC Universal, or even Disco Max, or whatever we'll call Warner post Discovery, like that's a massive amount of impressions, but also the quality of those impressions, the immersiveness of that video. There is not a good currency that values that right now. And I'm going to propose that we're going to take what worked for Facebook and Google, and we're going to apply it to the top of the funnel. And we're going to say who drove the first touch with the customer, because it's no longer predictable that they all show up in one place at the same time. So we want to know who is presenting that message the first time and start to attribute much more value there. Connected TV presents us tools. Connected TV data presents us tools. Identity between linear and nonlinear platforms allows us to figure out who's driving the incremental reach today. And I think new currencies will emerge that give credit where credit's due.
Well said. Ashley, final word.
I think something I would call audience fatigue. I think that this disaggregation is going to reach a sort of tipping point and come back around, particularly because the economics in the long tail don't pan out of saving money. And I think that discovery remains a problem. Finding which you want to watch, even though the recommendation engines have gotten better, it's still painful. And when I do not want a sad story, I keep getting sad stories. So, or really dark things in my feed. So that tells me that we've still got a lot to do there on recommendation engines.
Thanks for ending us on an upbeat note, Ashley. I'm teasing. All right. Thank you, Ashley, Ashwin, Tim, and Beth-ann. Great conversation about CTV. Obviously, a ton going on these days. So thanks for joining us. And thanks again to Pubmatic. I'm Will Richmond from VideoNuze.